Hello folks, welcome back to this chapter in Block 3. Here we're going to have a look at some of the resources that are available to you to check some information and statistics and rankings on the SDGs. The first one we're going to have a look at is a website. You can see the URL there, https://dashboards.sdgindex.org. This is the website which I was referring to in the previous video as the rankings website. It's actually more correctly a web page, as are a number of the other pages that I refer to. The two sources that we're going to look at today are the dashboard here and also the SDG tracker. As I mentioned previously, there are a number of other databases available on the internet, and we will refer to those in later modules, but the most important ones for the purposes of getting to grips with the basics of the SDG are these two websites. So the rankings website, you can see here, there's a number of headings here, so I'm just going to go through what you can get on this website. You can read the overall sustainability report 2022, quite a large document. I wouldn't suggest that you necessarily do that, but you can see that there's a huge amount of information there. It gives you an executive summary. The first part is the global plan to finance the SDGs, the SDG index and dashboards. It goes through and explains exactly what information is on it and how the information was arrived at, and policy efforts. And in part 4, the data systems and statistics used. We use a lot of statistics from the UN Stats website as well over the course of this program. So the next heading there is rankings, which I will come back to in a minute. You've got an interactive map here, so you can actually zone in on any country you want and get information on any of the SDGs in a number of different formats. You can go to a particular country profile, Mauritania for instance, and you can also go back and if you pick a particular country, you can download a profile for that particular country. As I mentioned in the last video, we have done that for Ireland, and you will see the scorecard for Ireland on the Moodle page. And later on, I'll be asking you to generate one of these pages for a country that you're particularly interested in and comparing the scores of that country with Ireland. So as I say, in addition, you've got the interactive map, you've got country profiles, so you can see, you go along and you can pick on a particular country, and that will bring you to various pieces of information in relation to the SDGs on that particular country. There's also graphical ways to sort of look at information on various countries, which we'll have a look at later. And you can also download the report itself and all the other data that's available on the website. So we'll go back to rankings. So what's very useful about this, of course, is that it ranks the SDG in order of their performance. They're ranked by their overall score. The scores measure the total progress towards achieving the 17 goals. The scores can be interpreted as a percentage of the SDG achievement, and a score of 100 indicates that all SDGs have been achieved. As you'll see, none of them have achieved 100, or certainly it hasn't been reported that way. And you can see that the Scandinavian countries are featuring very prominently in the top there. Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Austria, Germany, France, Switzerland, Ireland features 9th, which is very impressive, I think. UK 11, Czech, a number of other countries as you go down. You might be surprised to see some countries like the United States doing slightly worse than you'd expect. But it's interesting, as you will learn as we go through, some of the statistics show some very interesting trends, and it's an interesting talking point I'm hoping that you will be able to discuss with your colleagues on the blogs when we are looking at the assignment later on. You will also see that it goes down through the 193 countries are listed, but it only goes to 163 because not all of them are returning enough information to actually give them a ranking. So it only goes to 163, and the lowest score there is 39.05 for Sudan. So that's the first bit of information you can glean and data scorecards you can generate. Next thing of interest I'd like to introduce you to is called the spillover score, which I think is very useful. So countries are ranked by their spillover score also. Each country's actions can have, as you can imagine, positive or negative effects on other countries' abilities to achieve the SDGs. The spillover index assesses such spillovers along 3 dimensions: environment and social impacts embodied into trade, economy and finance, and security. A higher score means that a country causes more positive and fewer negative spillover effects. So effectively, the higher the score, the less negative or the more positive the result. So you can see here that some of the countries which wouldn't have probably score very high on the regular score score very high on the spillover score, because they're not actually doing a lot of activities that are going to have negative impacts on the ability of other countries to achieve the SDGs. So when you go through them, you have to travel down quite a long way before you start coming across, or indeed before you start dropping below 97%, 96%. You have to go down a long way till you start coming across European countries. So you can see you have to come down as far as 142 to get to the United States, which comes in at 64. And we have to go even further down to Ireland, which comes in at a score of 61.2. So it's interesting to note that the activities of these countries have negative impacts on other countries' ability to achieve the SDGs. This is something that's fascinating, I suppose. I think it's fascinating about the particular way that the information is gathered. And it provides an alternative way of looking at the performance of the SDG, or how countries perform in relation to the SDGs. So the next thing we're going to have a look at are the interactive map. So here we have the country profiles. So you can see this is a map of the globe and how they perform. So this is the overall scores. And you can see it's the color, there's a color gradation chart there. So the darker the color, the better they perform. Darker colors over 80%, and you can see the lighter colors are the worst performing. So the overall score measures the total progress towards achieving all 17 goals. So what you can do here is you can choose maybe to look at SDG 1. So it would pick there, and you can see how all the countries are doing. And you can, down here, you can further pick SDG 2, SDG 3, SDG 4, and you get basically a summary or an overview of their ratings. So for instance here, if we look at affordable and clean energy, SDG 7, you can see that the SDG is achieved in Brazil and in Sweden, Norway, but in many other countries there is a lot of challenges. The red is major challenges. Spain, challenges still remain. Ireland, significant challenges remain. So it's very interesting to see how these map out on a global scale, and also very useful to be able to zone in like this in a graphical way to get some information on the SDG performance of the various countries. So again, we could just say pick Ireland, and you could just go spillover score. And you'll see the spillover score is 61.2, the spillover ranking is 147. You could then pick the overall score, and you'll see it gives you a nice graphic there. And this is the performance. So all of these results, all of these data points are on the scorecard, which I asked you to have a look at. You can just generate it by downloading it there. So the trends are improving in no poverty. So as I say, if we're looking at Ireland, for instance, so you can click on Ireland and you can zoom in, and you can see how it's doing under the various headings. Country profiles, you can now pick Ireland, gives you the overall scores for the SDG. We're ranked 9th. Ireland is out of 163, and our SDG index score is 80.7. Our spillover score, though, is a rather disappointing 61.2. And here you have a sort of nice graphic overview of how we're performing in relation to all the SDGs. So as I mentioned in the previous class, or in the previous chapter, there is a website called the GeoHive, which is irelandsdg.geohive.ie. It's a website where you can get information on Ireland's performance in relation to the SDGs. Now, as I said, it's not terribly well populated, but we will be dipping into it as we go through the program for information on various SDGs. The next website that I'd like you to have a look at is called the SDG Tracker. So again, this is https sdg-tracker.org. So there's a lot of really interesting and useful information on this web page as well. As I mentioned, the data used here is from Our World in Data database, and there's links to that on the web page. So you can have a look, we'll say, at goal number 1, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. So if you scroll down, you will see a lot of really good information put together here. So there's a graphic there of the map and a number of tabs. So if we go into the chart, you can see that there's various scores. Now this is for SDG 1.1.1, SDG Indicator 1.1.1, and you can see how various countries, so you could actually go into this and you could take out the countries that are selected there, and you could just choose to compare, say, 2 countries that you're interested in. So we can just choose, I suppose, Ireland is the handiest one for comparisons, and let's just take Iraq. And you can see there that the data for Ireland and Iraq, not particularly useful data on this particular one. I think perhaps we might take some other countries. Let's take Austria as well. So now we have a little bit more data to compare. So you can see how Austria compares to Iraq, and so you can see the reason in this, there probably isn't a lot of data for Ireland in relation to extreme poverty. But let's just have a look at another one where we might be doing perhaps a little better. Good health and well-being. And we go to the chart and we add a country. So we maybe compare it to Israel, for instance. And then you can see the world figures up there in Ireland and Israel. So doing quite well on this in terms of very few maternity deaths. So you can see there's a huge amount of information, and you've got a date scroll along here. Various ways you can look at the information. You can generate, or you can review tables, and it gives you the sources of where they get some of the information. So it goes through all of the indicators. So in the future, we will be looking at how countries are performing in relation to the targets and how they're performing in relation to each of the indicators. Overall, it's a great tool which we will be using in the future modules to examine how various countries, and in Ireland in particular, are performing against each of the indicators. To conclude, I'd like to bring you back to the Irish scorecard. So it basically brings all the information together in a nice, tidy format. Obviously, you can get much more detailed information on each of the SDGs from the SDG Tracker, which we've just looked at. But the scorecard gives you a good overview. So you can see there, it gives you the ranking, the country score, the average performance by SDG in that particular type of graphic is a very good way of being able to express how we're performing. You can see that really we're only performing at 100% in SDGs 1 and 4, which is quite interesting and somewhat satisfying being in the education sector. But there's a lot of challenges there and a lot of other work that has to go on and be carried out. You get a quick overview of how the country is doing in relation to each SDG, whether we're improving or stagnating or actually disimproving. And then the color coding provides you an overview of the challenges, whether major, significant or small or achieved. So it's very interesting, and it also tells you whether information is actually unavailable or not. A quick overview of the spillover index as the statistical performance, and there it gives you a brief overview of not all the indicators, but a lot of them in quite an easy to view and easy to compare format. So what I'd like you to do, I think you'll read it on in the text bar below, is to compare another country that you're interested in to the scores of Ireland and see if there's any of the scores that surprise you. So I hope you enjoy doing that, and look forward to seeing you in the next block. Thank you.